So I know I said last week that we would be talking about the wonderful world of reading in your target language, but I realized that last week was more about the theory of learning vocab. Where's the practicality? Bianca, you're going to be a neuroscientist. You're going to start your PhD soon. How can you leave all of your wonderful viewers with only half of the vocabulary acquisition story? We need an explanation of the transition from theory into practice. 大家好，欢迎来到我的频道。My name is Bianca, and apparently I struggle with fully completing a topic prior to moving on to the next one. As a quick aside, I look like a scrub because I'm filming this at 6:30 in the morning. We love early mornings, but as another quick aside, in the upcoming months, you'll see some new forms of content that may not be completely language related. And why, you may ask? Well, I am moving. I'll be going to the Big Apple, which is the most exciting as well as nerve-wracking experience that I found myself in during my short time on this big blue marble that we call home. I'm sure that's a fairly relatable experience. So get ready for some lifestyle vlogs, apartment makeovers, and general life as a PhD student in New York. And maybe I'll finally become a quote-unquote YouTuber. But I am finally going to leave the box that I've been trapped in as my filming studio. Are there any second-generation K-pop fans out there? You know how SM used to always just film their artists in the same studio box set, just with slight variations in light and color? Yeah, that's basically me, except I don't have the budget to change up anything, so... But keep an eye out for those videos in the late summer, early fall, and put your guess in the comments as to which school I'll be attending in September. And if you guess right, I'll make a video about my experiences applying to PhD programs during one of the most brutal and soul-crushing cycles, at least according to r/grad admissions. I'll share my stats and give some general advice after 2 years in academic research and 4 years of industry research. But without further ado, vocabulary acquisition and retention. That is the hottest combination of words that I've ever seen. So how does one acquire and retain the vocabulary that they encounter in their general studies? Last week I gave a general framework for some major theories behind vocabulary acquisition, namely the process by which memories transition from short-term memory to long-term memory. If you haven't watched last week's video, click the link in the description. But TLDR, the brain is a pattern recognition machine. To increase efficiency, it forgets things that aren't important. How does one remember things for the long term? Convince the brain of its importance by encountering it a ton of times in a ton of situations using a ton of sensory experiences. But ultimately, that theory comes down to motivation, and I'm sure you've all experienced this before. Motivation will only carry you so far. Sometimes we need tools that help us develop diligence or anchor our studies in such a way that progress is visible. Because motivation, interest, and excitement is like the Karate Kid. Wax on, wax off. Wait, Bianca, that's not what the scene was about. Or is it? What happened when the kid got frustrated that he was doing all this seemingly insignificant busy work? Cleaning cars, painting fences, and whatnot. That's not karate, that's child labor. But all of that work, diligence, and muscle memory translated to achieving the goal he wanted to. His motivation to learn was lessened by the seemingly lack of progress that he saw, until his sensei reframed his perspective. And here's a quick takeaway. Learning vocabulary and just language learning in general is not always an exciting, fun, or intellectually stimulating process. At times it can be humbling, like when the Karate Kid was doing manual labor for his sensei. At first you feel like a small child again, learning the basic colors, animals, barely being able to communicate, always getting everything wrong. That's a humbling experience as an adult learner, but the work, the diligence, and the muscle memory will both carry through periods of decreasing motivation and help you reframe your progress to show these little trickles of vocabulary streams that, when combined together, form a larger river. So here is practical tip number 1 to put in your language acquisition toolbox. Remember that all the work, both the exciting and the mundane, the seemingly high and the low progress reports, the interesting and the boring, they are working in tandem to create a little web of patterns that will just keep growing and growing. Okay, that was still not the most tangible thing in the world. So let's give some tips that are actually more easily applicable. So use content that utilizes all sensory experiences. Okay, maybe not all. You can't really taste or smell vocab unless you're eating food, which honestly sounds like a pretty amazing idea. But remember last week how I mentioned that a key step in vocabulary retention is memory consolidation through a variety of sensory experiences that reinforce each other. Think about your most vivid memory. You can probably recall the appearance of the place that you're at. Vision. Maybe you can hear the sounds around you. Auditory. Or smell the things in your immediate vicinity. Olfactory. Or maybe you're tasting something. Gustatory. Or touching something. Tactile. Let's see how we can apply that to vocabulary retention. So you learn a sentence about a puppy that is under a chair. In Mandarin, that would be 小狗在椅子下面. Vision. You look at the sentence and try to figure out what the characters are. 小狗 is puppy. 在 is a location word. 椅子 is chair. And 下面 is under. The puppy is under the chair. Audition. You hear the sentences being spoken by a native speaker. You can now start to connect the visual input from the written characters with the auditory input, the sounds that correspond to each character. The visual cue of the sentence will now be reinforced when you hear the sentence being spoken. Tactile. You write the sentence character by character. As you write the characters, you're reinforcing the visual input of the sentence with a tactile experience. And you may even remember a word just by remembering how you wrote it. But tactile doesn't really include an auditory component. So I bring an audition by saying the word or the sentence out loud while I write it. And bam, we just got this one sentence reinforced 3 ways from a simple 5-minute exercise. And if the sentence relates to something that can be tasted or smelled, you can include your experience sensing that word, which will give you 5 senses by which you reinforce the content. And the beauty of this tool is that it can be applied to anything and everything. It also gives you a great way to measure progress when motivation to learn is hard. Even if your listening sucks, you can anchor yourself on the fact that you're getting much better at reading the sentence. Or maybe your writing is improving. You have given yourself more baby steps to reframe your perspective when learning is just too hard, when progress just doesn't seem to materialize. 3. Keep repeating and reviewing content, especially through all those sensory experiences that we learned from point 2. There's just no way that you'll remember a sentence after one look at it. When you go through a textbook dialogue, for example, look at it, process it through the various sentences, learn it and let it go for a bit, and then review it. This process of forgetting and remembering builds up your recall ability. Learning a language isn't just about recognizing that a word seems familiar, but it's about learning a word and being able to use it in real life, being able to pull it out of your short-term and long-term memory. So how do we turn this process of recalling information into muscle memory? By practicing recalling information. Neuroscience makes sense, doesn't it? Well, some stuff makes sense. The brain is complicated, but that's for my PhD. So incorporating periods of recall into your learning is important. Spaced repetition softwares help with this, but you can also do this in an analog way, or incorporate both, like I do. So when I first read through a text, I read through the sentence, listen to the audio, and then write the sentences down. And then I move on to the next dialogue. After I finish all the material that I wanted to learn that day, I go back to that first dialogue and repeat that process. Read, listen, and write. The following day, I forget a decent chunk of what I learned yesterday. So what do? I go back to that dialogue. Read, listen, and write. And after 2 days, again, I go back to what I learned and read, listen, and write. And with each review, I'm remembering and recalling more. With each review, I make it more challenging by forcing myself to pull out that information without the help of vocab lists or English translations. With each cycle of forgetting and reviewing, I'm training my brain to recall that information the next time that I encounter it. And honestly, these are really the only major tools you need to learn a language. Memory consolidation through various sensory experiences and active recall. But the internet loves to pose other learning hacks that fit in the various language categories, namely reading, writing, and listening. So I'll dive deeper into those topics in the upcoming weeks. How do you practically learn to write in your target language? How do you practically learn to read in your target language? How do you practically learn to listen in your target language? How do you make a sentence without using the word practically? What does neuroscience have to say about all of these things? We'll talk about that next week and in the upcoming week. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned for the rest of these videos that are coming out. And if you like what I do, want to support what I do, please give a like, comment, share, subscribe, and check out my Patreon if you're interested. Check out Mandarin Standard Mandarin Weekly if you're interested in as well. I have a 5% discount code in the description, and we'll actually talk about them when I breach the topic of reading. So I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one. 再见.